The year was 2023. 25 years had passed since detectives first walked through the front door of the Bennett home. 25 years since Detective Michael Harris stood in a quiet hallway trying to understand how an entire family could disappear from the world in a single night. The city had changed. Neighborhoods had grown. Businesses had come and gone. Children born after the murders were now adults with families of their own. But inside evidence storage rooms, time moved differently. The photographs remained unchanged. The statements remained unchanged. The victims remained exactly as investigators had left them decades earlier. Frozen in paperwork. Frozen in memory. Frozen in unanswered questions. Detective Laura Martinez refused to let the case become another forgotten archive. Every January, she ordered a complete review of the investigation. Fresh eyes often noticed old mistakes. And old mistakes sometimes solved old crimes. The process was exhausting. Thousands of pages. Hundreds of interviews. Boxes filled with reports written by detectives who had long since retired. Most reviews changed nothing. This one did. It began with a witness statement from 1998. 3 sentences. Buried inside an interview conducted less than 24 hours after the Bennett murders. A neighbor named Carol Evans reported seeing a man walking near the subdivision shortly before dawn. The statement had never attracted attention. The description was too vague. Male. Medium height. Dark jacket. Nothing useful. Except for one detail. The man carried a toolbox. Martinez stopped reading. Construction. Maintenance work. Utility vehicles. The pattern appeared once again. Investigators had spent years looking for unusual behavior. What if the killer succeeded because he looked ordinary? A man carrying a toolbox in a residential neighborhood attracts no attention. A man in work clothes walking near homes raises no alarms. People hold doors open for him. Smile at him. Ignore him. The disguise was not clothing. The disguise was normality. The task force re-examined every witness report connected to previous cases. They found work boots, reflective jackets, tool belts, company logos nobody remembered. The clues had been there from the beginning. They simply never appeared important enough to connect. Then came another discovery. Nathan Cole had once worked for a regional electrical contractor responsible for projects in nearly every city connected to the murders. Employment records placed him near victims months before attacks occurred. Not proof, but no longer coincidence. Martinez pushed for excavation of old storage units rented under aliases linked to Cole. Most were empty. One was not. Inside, investigators found boxes of newspaper clippings covering murders from 3 states. Victim photographs, maps, travel receipts, police sketches. The discovery shocked even veteran detectives. Still, prosecutors faced the same problem. Interest in crime is not illegal. Collecting newspaper articles is not illegal. Maps prove travel, not murder. The evidence built a story. The courtroom required proof. Families waited anxiously as forensic laboratories examined every object recovered from the unit. Weeks turned into months. Then the report arrived. A partial DNA sample recovered from adhesive tape matched degraded genetic material collected from one of the original crime scenes decades earlier. Not enough for certainty. Not enough for prosecution. But enough to suggest investigators had finally moved closer to the truth than ever before. The announcement reached national headlines. For the first time in years, the victims' families allowed themselves hope. Perhaps there would be answers after all. Perhaps the story would finally end. Then came the problem nobody expected. Nathan Cole's DNA could not be obtained. No medical samples existed. No military records. No criminal records. No biological relatives willing or able to provide comparison samples. The investigation had reached the edge of certainty and stopped. Again. Detective Harris visited the task force office shortly after the results arrived. He walked slowly now. Age had stolen speed, but not determination. He studied the evidence board in silence. Finally, he smiled. Not because the case had been solved. Because after 25 years, investigators finally had direction. Sometimes this is what justice looks like, he said. Martinez disagreed immediately. "This isn't justice." "No," Harris replied. "But it's closer than the families had yesterday." The words stayed with her. Because unsolved cases rarely end the way movies promise. There are no dramatic confessions. No last-minute revelations. No courtroom scenes where every question receives an answer. Reality is messy. Sometimes investigators identify the killer after death. Sometimes evidence points strongly in one direction without ever crossing the line required by law. Sometimes certainty exists in the minds of detectives, but nowhere else. The Bennett case slowly entered that category. Officially unsolved. Unofficially understood. The distinction mattered greatly to investigators. It mattered less to families. For Rebecca Bennett's sister, the important question had never been punishment. It had been knowledge. She wanted to know who. She wanted to know why. She wanted to know whether the killer had ever felt guilt. No investigation could answer the final question. Perhaps no investigation ever could. In 2025, the city unveiled a memorial honoring victims of unsolved homicides. Families gathered beneath gray skies as names were read aloud. Detective Harris attended quietly near the back of the crowd. So did Detective Martinez. Neither spoke during the ceremony. Neither needed to. They understood something many people never see. Behind every case number is a birthday, a favorite song, a laugh remembered by family members decades later. Victims become evidence inside investigations. They remain people everywhere else. As the ceremony ended, a young reporter approached Harris. After nearly 30 years, she asked, did he believe the killer had finally been identified? The detective considered the question carefully. Then he gave the same answer he had given many times before. I believe someone knows the truth. The reporter asked if he meant investigators. Harris shook his head. Family members. Friends. Co-workers. Someone saw something that never felt important until years later. History supported him. Some of the world's most famous cold cases ended because someone remembered an old conversation. An unusual habit. A strange absence. Memory solves cases as often as technology. Sometimes more often. The reporter asked one final question. What frightened him most about killers who are never caught? Harris looked toward the memorial before answering. It's not that they escape punishment, he said. It's that they steal endings. The sentence stayed with everyone who heard it. Because he was right. Arrests create endings. Trials create endings. Verdicts create endings. Unsolved murders leave doors permanently open. Families continue imagining different futures, different outcomes, different lives. The story never reaches its final page. And perhaps that is why society remains fascinated by killers who disappear. Not because of violence. Not because of mystery. Because unfinished stories are difficult to live with. We want answers. We need conclusions. We search for order in places where chaos won. Yet despite everything, detectives continue returning to old files. Not because they expect success every time. Because sometimes they succeed once. One fingerprint. One witness. One forgotten box inside an evidence room. That possibility keeps investigations alive. Somewhere tonight, a laboratory technician is testing evidence collected before they were born. Somewhere, a retired detective is reviewing notes one final time. Somewhere, a family waits beside a telephone hoping tomorrow brings news that yesterday did not. And somewhere, perhaps closer than anyone realizes, sits a person carrying secrets that belong to history. Whether those secrets disappear forever or eventually reach the light remains unknown. For now, the files remain open. The questions remain waiting. And the shadows still belong to the killers who were never caught. Not every mystery ends. Not every story receives justice. But none of them deserve to be forgotten. Because as long as names continue being spoken and cases continue being opened, the victims remain more than evidence. They remain remembered. And sometimes remembrance is the first step toward answers that arrive decades late. The hunt continues. The files remain open. And somewhere in the silence between what investigators know and what they can prove, the truth still waits.